So there's a new parenting style trending, and the style isn't necessarily new, but for the first time, we have given it a name. Studio 5 parenting contributor Heather Johnson will introduce us to eggshell parenting and fill us in on what it is and why you should avoid it. Welcome, Heather.
Thanks.
Okay, so what is eggshell parenting?
So an eggshell parent is someone who does something, behaves in ways that leaves their kids feeling like they're walking on eggshells.
That sounds terrible.
It does. Doesn't that sound terrible? Where kids are uncertain, where they don't know what's going to happen, and an eggshell parent behaves in ways that puts kids in that position. They're constantly trying to navigate, almost like they're riding a roller coaster, the ups and downs all the time, right? So this type of parent, if we're looking at what this looks like.
Yeah, how do we know if we are one, I think is the question we're all asking.
Yes, if there's emotions that run hot and cold very quickly, right? If all of a sudden you're fine, and then 2 seconds later, there's this big explosion, kids are left wondering what in the world is going on. If you're a parent that often finds yourself dismissing feelings, where a child will say, you know, I'm hungry, and we say, no, you're not. Or they say, this is hard, and we say, no, it isn't. You're fine. That type of response is going to come from that place of being an eggshell parent.
Because it leaves the children feeling what?
It leaves them feeling so confused.
Okay.
It leaves them feeling really uncertain. It also leads them to take a lot of responsibility, right? They start to feel like their parents' emotions are a byproduct of if they did it right or did it wrong.
Okay.
Right? Again, you're looking at, if we're looking for patterns, it's this frequency, where as a parent, we can't stay constant or consistent. And the way that we respond is bigger or not proportionate to what's happening, right? So this would be, for example, a child coming home late for curfew, and we receive that child and it's like, no big deal, go to bed. But then that child wakes up the next morning and we are furious. And they're like, but wait, last night we were good.
We were good at 12:01.
We were good, it was okay, but now this morning we're not, right? Or it can go the other way. It can be where a child comes home and talks about something that's hard, and we make it out to be such a big deal. And they're going, it's not that big of a deal. And then 10 seconds later, we dismiss it, right? So it's that inability to regulate those emotions. And again, it puts our kids in position where they take responsibility.
Yeah.
They're uncomfortable sharing their emotions because they're worried, if I tell you how I feel, I don't know what I'm going to get.
Right.
Right?
I'm on eggshells. I'm on pins and needles.
All the time.
You say this stems oftentimes from how we were raised as kids.
Yeah, we have to remember that parents and the way that they raise their kids will do for the most part what their parents have done. So if your parents tended to raise you this way, you're more likely to raise your own children this way. And it's something to take note of, to recognize, hey, is this a pattern? Did I feel this uncertainty? Did I feel like I walked on eggshells with my parents? Was it hard for me to express myself? Did I feel uncomfortable or like I was riding a roller coaster? And if you did, you're probably passing those things on to your kids. So we want to take a step back and recognize if that's the case. Now, this sometimes puts us in a tricky spot, right? Because if you're done raising kids,
you read my mind. I'm sitting here thinking, if I'm the woman out there who is done with the daily parenting phase, maybe I'm in the Nana phase of life, and I'm looking back and saying, shoot, that was me.
Yep.
What do I do in that situation?
Yeah, if you find yourself in that position, the first thing we're going to do is you're going to give yourself a ton of grace. You're actually going to recognize that in the moment, back then, 5, 10, however long ago years, you did the best that you knew how, and you're going to do that first. We can't change the past, and we have to accept that. We all feel that with parenting, right? We find ourselves in this position where we look back, even if it was last night, and go, oh man, I could have done that differently. Yeah. So if you feel that, give yourself the space to recognize that going backwards will not change it. So putting all of our energy into, I wish it would have been different, it won't help you today. Then, if you're in that position, take responsibility. Acknowledge that if you handled things that way, you're going to go to those kids and work to make sure that you have a relationship with your grown children now, that there's repair in it, by taking responsibility, by saying, hey, in hindsight, I didn't do that right. I didn't handle that in a healthy way, and take responsibility for it, and then apologize for it.
You find those words mean a lot. And
mean
maybe
a lot.
more so to different personalities or different people. But I was in a conversation with a friend recently, and she just wanted to hear words. And I found myself thinking, would it change anything? Does it matter? But those words, I could tell, were so important to her.
They're taking responsibility. It's accountability for what happened. And we often, again, by personality or how we've interpreted things, it can feel really healing to have someone take responsibility, right? Even if we've worked through it as an adult child. So if you find yourself in that place and you're not raising kids, but you recognize you might have been an eggshell parent, there might have been some of that behavior, take responsibility for it so that you can grow through it.
Let's talk about how to avoid eggshell parenting now in the present. This first one caught me by surprise. You want us to evaluate our emotional age.
Yes, I do. We're going to start there.
No.
I know. It's terrible, isn't it? Have we ever stopped to ask ourselves, if we didn't know how old we were, how old would people think we were by how we acted emotionally?
What a terribly wonderful question. Is this EQ then?
Very much.
Yeah.
Just take a step back and say, because remember, when we're talking about being an eggshell parent, a lot of that behavior shows some emotional immaturity, some inability to manage our emotions, right? Where 1 second everything's fine and the next I'm flying off the handle, and now I'm flying off the handle and then everybody's peaceful.
You just described a teenager.
Yes, it's exactly right. So if no one knows my age, yet they watched me act, would they be able to say, yep, Heather, I can see you are 40-something?
Yeah.
Would they be able to say that? Or would they go by my emotional behavior, man, are you 12? And so asking ourselves that question, we actually want to act our emotional age. We want to make sure that those emotions show that we have some years behind us.
That is a fascinating question and a self kind of introspective
reflection, absolutely.
moment.
Yes.
Okay, you talked about the proportions of my reaction. Is my reaction in line with the proportion of the situation?
We do, and we check proportions with so many things. When we're cooking, when we're clothing ourselves. I mean, this idea of proportion is actually a part of what we do in our lives all the time. We don't often take a step back and ask ourselves, wait, is the way I respond, is it in proportion to the situation at hand? That spilled Cheerios. Does my response represent, is it proportional to the fact that those are just Cheerios on the floor? Or that's a B, right? It's not an A, but that's a B in English. Is my response proportional to what's happening here? Because remember, we're wanting to set up our children to be in a very safe environment. We don't want them to feel like they're walking on eggshells. When the proportions are mixed up, they feel like they're walking on eggshells.
You're advising parents to not let the past dictate the future. This requires maybe some education on our part to improve upon what the last generation tried their best to do.
Absolutely. For us to be willing to grow, right, to be a transitional character, it's really easy as parents to say, well, my parents did it this way and I don't know any different.
Yeah.
Or my parents did it this way and I turned out fine, so this is what you're going to get also. What we actually want to ask ourselves as parents is, no matter how our parents did it, if it's not healthy, if it's not building relationships, if it's not beneficial today, it doesn't matter how our parents did it. It doesn't matter. And we don't want to rely on that as an excuse. So the way it happens is we use that excuse to protect ourselves from having to learn something new or make changes or develop new abilities and gain new tools. We want to choose to grow instead of self-protect. If we're self-protecting that way with those excuses, we're actually choosing not to grow. You can't have both. And so we want to be that transitional character that says, I'm going to do whatever it takes to have this be healthy, to choose to grow.
And I think it can, I hope it can land with a tone of respect. Like you said, everyone was doing their best,
Absolutely.
but we have progressed and things have improved. So let's grab hold of that and embrace the growth.
And embrace it, absolutely.
Finally, take responsibility and apologize.
Yes, which is going to go back to us being willing in the moment also to say, I'm sorry I did that, to take responsibility. If you yell, if your emotions aren't proportional, if you are not acting your emotional age, take responsibility for it. Look at your kids and have no problem saying, I'm sorry. What I just did, not cool. That wasn't good, right? Now, this leads to apologizing, which is really hard for some people. It can be really hard. We tend to think that if we apologize, it means that we're less than in some way. An apology doesn't diminish me. If I need to apologize to kids or to my spouse or to a neighbor, it doesn't diminish me in any way by offering out an apology. So when we look at apology, one of the first things, because we don't often do it right, we want to make sure that the first thing we do is that we actually express the regret by saying, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Say the words.
Okay.
Heaven forbid we actually say the words, I'm sorry. Then we want to make sure we take responsibility, where we're telling them what we're sorry for. I'm sorry that I yelled. I'm sorry that my emotions weren't under control. Actually take responsibility. Now, this is the key piece that's often missed. Once we take that responsibility, we have to be able, or we want to work to be able to express what those feelings would be that they're experiencing given my behavior. And we want to say them out loud. If we raised our voice and yelled, if the behavior was not proportionate, how would that leave kids feeling?
Okay.
There's going to be fear. They're going to be scared. They probably don't feel like they can speak up or express what they're thinking.
So say those
things.
things.
Say those words.
Okay.
Don't just say, I'm sorry I did that. As a result of what I did, here's where what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And then after that, be sure you wrap it up by telling your kids, your spouse, anyone, what you're going to do different next time.
How it's going to change.
How it's going to change, so that you actually offer an apology. That's taking responsibility. because you've hit all of the points and taken responsibility for it.
This was such a rich, loaded conversation. Thank you for introducing us to eggshell parenting and how to handle it from all stages and all sides. Heather, we appreciate you. To contact Heather for counseling, you can find her information on our website.